Welcome. Let us begin with a foundational question. What happens legally when a person who has not yet reached the age of majority enters into a contract? Today's explainer delves into this very topic, the capacity of the parties, with a specific focus on the legal effect of a minor's agreement. Our agenda is structured to build your understanding methodically. We will begin with the foundations of contractual capacity. We will then establish the core doctrine that a minor's agreement is absolutely void and explore its implications. Following this, we will analyze landmark case law. We then examine the crucial exceptions before concluding with a summary designed for effective exam revision. We begin with Section 1, Foundations of Contractual Capacity. Here, we will lay the groundwork by examining the specific statutory provisions that define who is and who is not competent to enter into a legally binding contract. Our topic is the capacity of the parties, specifically focusing on the effect of a minor's agreement. The legal framework is primarily established by the Indian Contract Act 1872. The relevant provisions are Sections 10, 11, 64, 65, and 68. This is complemented by the Indian Majority Act 1875. Together, these statutes form the authoritative basis for our discussion. Let us read Section 11 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 verbatim. Every person is competent to contract who is of the age of majority according to the law to which he is subject, and who is of sound mind and is not disqualified from contracting by any law to which he is subject. This section lays down three essential conditions for competency. First, attaining the age of majority. Second, possessing a sound mind. And third, not being legally disqualified. The absence of any one of these renders a person incompetent to contract. Now, we turn to Section 3 of the Indian Majority Act 1875. It states, "Every person domiciled in India shall be deemed to have attained his majority when he shall have completed his age of 18 years, and not before." The implication of this section is clear and unambiguous. It establishes a bright-line rule. For the purposes of contract law in India, the age of majority is 18. We now proceed to Section 2. Having established who a minor is, we must ask the central question: why, in the eyes of the law, is an agreement with a minor considered absolutely void? This section explores the core doctrine and its underlying legal rationale. To understand the doctrine, we must be familiar with three foundational legal maxims. First, void ab initio, which translates to void from the very beginning. This means the agreement was never legally valid. Second, consensus ad-idem, meaning agreement upon the same thing in the same sense. The law presumes a minor lacks the mature judgment for a true meeting of minds. Finally, Nemo det quod non habet, no one can pass a better title than what he himself possesses. Let us simplify the legal standing. First, the principle of minor's incompetency. The law states unequivocally that a minor lacks the legal capacity to contract. From this follows the second principle, absolute nullity. An agreement with a minor is not merely flawed or voidable, it is a complete nullity, void from the start. The reason for this strict rule is the third principle, a protective policy. The law functions as a protective shield, safeguarding infants from entering into detrimental obligations. Section 3 examines the real-world consequences of this absolutely void status. What does this mean in practice? It means there are specific legal restrictions and outcomes that flow directly from the initial nullity of the agreement. Let us explore these implications. On this slide, we contrast the essential requirements with the resulting limitations. As we know from Section 11, the essentials are the age of majority, a sound mind, and no legal disqualification. Now, observe the stark limitations. First, no ratification. A minor cannot validate a void agreement after becoming a major. Second, no estoppel. A minor can always plead minority as a defense, even if they deliberately lied about their age. And third, no specific performance. A court will never compel a minor to carry out a void agreement. Let us apply these principles to three scenarios. In the mortgage scenario, a minor borrows 25,000 rupees via a mortgage. The result? Void. The lender cannot recover the sum. In the joint note scenario, a major and minor sign a promissory note. The result? Enforceable against the major only. Finally, in the education scenario, a minor has supplied necessary textbooks on credit. The result? The seller can recover the cost from the minor's estate. We now arrive at a critical section, landmark case law analysis. Statutory law provides the rules, but it is through judicial interpretation in landmark cases that these rules are tested, clarified, and solidified. These precedents are essential for understanding how the principles are applied. Let us examine Mohiri Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghosh. Citation 1903, Privy Council 30 Calcutta 539. The decision was rendered by Justice Sir Ford North. The facts. A minor misrepresented his age to borrow 20,000 rupees from a moneylender through a mortgage. The issue, is a minor's mortgage void or voidable? The ratio decidendi was that competency is essential for a contract. Without it, no agreement exists to be voidable. The decision, the agreement is void ab initio. This case settled the law in India. Next, Leslie R. Limited versus Shiel, citation 1914, 3 King's Bench 607, a decision by Lord Sumner. The facts. A minor lied about his age to borrow £400 and spent the money. The issue. Can the lender recover the money via the doctrine of restitution? Lord Sumner delivered the famous ratio decidendi. Restitution stops where repayment begins. Since the money was spent, it was not traceable. The decision. The minor was not liable to restore the sum. Having established the general rule, we now turn to the exceptions in Section 5. The law recognizes that an absolute, unyielding rule can sometimes lead to injustice. Let us explore the specific situations where a transaction involving a minor may be, to some extent, enforceable. First, necessitaries under Section 68. A minor's estate is liable for supplies suited to their condition in life. Second, beneficiary status. A minor can be a promisee or transferee. Third, apprenticeship. Service contracts for a minor's benefit are binding, as established in Roberts v. Gray. Fourth, insurance. A contract of insurance is valid if for the benefit of the minor's property. We now reach our final section, summary and exam revision. The purpose here is to consolidate the key principles we have discussed and to provide a framework for recall. This decision map provides a logical flowchart. Upon agreement entry, first ask, is it for necessaries under Section 68? If yes, the minor's estate is liable. If no, ask, is it for the minor's benefit? If yes, the agreement is valid, with the minor's promisee. If the answer to both is no, then we arrive at the default rule from Section 11. The agreement is void ab initio. For quick revision, remember the VREN rule. V stands for void ab initio, R for ratification not allowed, E for estoppel does not apply, and N for necessaries are recoverable from the estate. And always remember the landmark case, Mohiri Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghosh. We conclude with a thought for your deeper reflection. How does the absolute protection granted to minors balance against the principles of commercial certainty and the potential for injustice to adults who transact in good faith? I encourage further reading on equitable remedies and the evolution of the doctrine of restitution in minors' contracts. Thank you.